I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Tom Brewster. Dr. Brewster is a monumental force in the field of education with over 35 plus years of experience in the field. In this discussion, you'll learn about the education system, optimizing student and teacher relationships, visibility in the classroom, music, preparing for life after graduation, and much, much more. Dr. Brewster has a wide range of valuable knowledge, perspectives, stories, and quotes that he generously shared based on his experiences in life thus far. Thank you for tuning into the Common Human Podcast. Seek knowledge and wisdom always. Dr. Brewster, you know yourself better than anyone else, better than your friends, your coworkers, neighbors, and maybe even your family. Could you touch on your 35 plus years of experience and background in education while just touching on who you are in general?
One thing I learned early on, my mother was a secretary in the school system in the maintenance department. And one of the things that she always said was her job was important because from her vantage point, she was able to make the connections necessary to ensure the schools were kept clean, the heat was on, the cooling was on, all those things that make the conditions of the school conducive to student learning. She was really the conduit that made all of that happen, the connectivity for all of those different projects to come together as one. So one thing I learned from her is everyone has a role to play in the education of a child. And with certainly with, I learned a lot from my mother. I think it influenced particularly my career in education. I've always been service oriented. Family's always been, at the, one of the most important things to me in terms of, how I operate and who I am as a person. I identify with family, I identify with place, I identify with where I'm from. I'm a Southwest Virginia guy. I'm from Bluefield. I'm from a place called Tip Top, which just happened to be the highest elevated point on the Norfolk and Southern or Norfolk and Western Railroad. And it was literally called Tip Top.
It's a nice coincidence.
Because it was, yeah. I was born and raised in Tip Top. I identify with the rural community there. It's been nice to be able to venture outside and live in other places, live in Roanoke, live in Charlottesville, live in Richmond. But that's home. I'm a Southwest Virginia guy. I'm from, a coal mining railroad community. And I think that's who I will always be.
Absolutely. And just mentioning on your mother's influence in regards to, you mentioned AC, all the little things that would potentially go into the education of students in general. All those things add up, and as a student, from their perspective, they might not notice that. So learning all of those tidbits is incredibly important, especially in education.
Everyone plays an important role, and I think particularly as a school administrator and even as a teacher, I think it made me aware that whenever we had a strategic initiative, there were a lot of people playing a part in making sure that come to fruition and that happened. So one of the things that certainly I learned early on was that you treat everyone with the respect that they deserve, and you treat everyone as if their job was the most important job in the school system.
100%. That's super important. So you were a social studies teacher to principal, to director of external affairs, to dean of education at a college. Are there major lessons or skills you learned as you continually advance yourself within education?
I had a lot of great mentors, some of whom, took me under their wing and taught me the importance of student first. I remember, my first mentor was a gentleman that was an assistant superintendent in the school system. I was a teacher, but I had the pleasure of being able to go to football games with him and kind of pal around. And he always told me, if you keep students at the heart of every decision you make, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be successful. And I tried to do that. I tried throughout my career to, keep students at the heart of every decision, every educational decision that I made. How's it going to benefit students? How it's going to impact students? Uh, you know, what is the outcome? What we want to achieve for the product that we produce and we transition into higher ed. Um, that as a classroom teacher, I think once you become an administrator, it's important that you never forget where you came from. And I remember my teaching years as being some of my best years in the profession, and just how important being visible and connecting with the students and building those relationships were to um, my success and the success of the students in the classroom. Visibility is extremely important because that's how you make the connections outside of the classroom. So I tried to carry that with me as a principal, to be intentionally visible.
Right.
And what I mean by intentionally visible, not just being a wallflower, not just, standing around, but actually engaging with people, learning about what was happening and what was going on out in the schools and out in the buildings, out in the classrooms, and with the students that I was working with, trying to learn as much about them. One of the most important things I did as a teacher, and I think I did also as an administrator, tried to attend, as many school events as I possibly could. Whether that would be band concerts, football games, basketball games, volleyball games.
Yeah.
I think students see you there. They know you care. It makes it a whole lot easier in the classroom. But I have to say this, you can't build relationships unless you establish boundaries. And, when you're a teacher and an administrator, you are, an authority figure. And many times we used to say in loco parentis, in place of parents, you had a responsibility. You were responsible for those students. You were responsible for their learning. So you had to play school first, and you had to set those boundaries, and you had to set your expectations. But at the same time, it didn't cut you off,
right.
From the student population. It didn't cut you off from being human. It just, you just had to let them know that, that there's an important goal here, and there's things that we want to accomplish, and we're going to do it together, but we have to have some boundaries in play first.
Exactly. And you mentioned so many things great things to unpack there, just in regards to the value system, especially when it comes to students. It's students first. And so having those mentors to tell you those things is always important to lead forward. And then I love how you're already mentioning visibility, and then operating on that fine line of discipline and having that leadership role, but also being there intentionally. And we're going to get to the visibility thing, or the broader topic of visibility a little sooner. But before that, I did want to ask, such an awesome story of, you became a vice principal at age 22nd. So a decade earlier, you in the same exact school as some of these students. So could you describe how you overcame external and internal fear when taking on the responsibility of a vice principal?
It's interesting, and I have to admit this, I probably wasn't the best student in high school. I don't think I really got committed to learning until I hit college. So I kind of understood when a student was kind of sandbagging or had other interests that he wanted to explore, that in order to tap into their true potential, I had to understand where they were coming from. And I think that, I had some teachers in school where I was more motivated in their class just simply because I felt like they understood where I was coming from. They understood that I had, interest outside of the classrooms that they could exploit.
Right.
And make me a better student. And exploit's not the right word. They could take advantage of to make me a better student. For example, I worked through high school. I started out bagging groceries at a place called Deskins, and then I went to work at what I would consider, a great job for a high school student, and that's working in a record store. And I know record stores don't exist today like they did then, but we had chains and record store chains, and I worked at a record bar, and so I was really into music, and that probably if you could connect with me through music and through pop culture and through history and social studies, then that was a connection to make
Those are the
that
core
would
aspects.
that would activate, certainly activate my brain.
Right.
So I think when I, went into teaching and learning, I think one of the things that I was able to really delve into was, trying to get to know the student and their interest and trying to stay relevant. And I know the older you get, the harder it is to stay relevant. But you have to try to stay current if you're going to relate to them. And
Exactly.
that's, a lot of the good teachers are able to do that. But yeah, getting back to the, becoming an assistant principal, I went into my high school that I graduated from 10 years later. And the first thing I had this teacher who was there at the time I graduated, walk up to me the day before, and she said, morale's really low. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh. And they said, yeah, they think you're too young. And a lot of them were here when you were a student, and they're not sure if you could do it.
Right.
And I think what that did was that put me in a state of, that was actually beneficial, because that put me in a state of perpetual awareness and alertness that I had to, go in and just, work as hard as I possibly could to gain their confidence and to gain their trust, but also to build relationships. So, I remember that first day, I was nervous. So I dressed up in a suit, jacket, suit, tie, everything. And I went out to the parking lots and started introducing myself to students as they came in to the door. It made me feel better. It made me feel more confident. It made me feel more comfortable. And at the same time, eventually, that became part of my routine. That became one of my habits. So parents got used to seeing me, in the parking lots and at the bus port, every morning, trying to be everywhere.
Yeah.
More than anything. I think as a high school assistant principal, that's one of the keys to success, is being where they don't expect you to be,
Exactly.
for more reasons than one. But, I really tried to get out there and be visible and tried to connect as quickly as I could, because, the thing about an administrative job, probably even more so today, is that it can swallow you up. It can swallow you up whole. So you really have to be in that state of perpetual alertness and preparation in order to, meet the demands of the day. It doesn't mean you can't have a bad day. I had plenty. And what I tried to do was, to quote Ted Lasso, be a goldfish, forget about it, and go
Exactly.
home and try to figure out how I'm going to make the next day work and how I'm going to make it better. Because some days, I read an article that really influenced me, when I was, when I was teaching, but wanting to become an administrator, is
Mm-hmm.
they said, the thing about being a principal or a school administrator is sometimes the blob runs in all directions. And what they meant by that was, sometimes you could take a jar of ink and throw it up against the wall and it goes everywhere. And sometimes education's a lot like that. Sometimes things just go crazy. And at that point, you just rely on your principles, you rely on what you're taught, you rely on your moral values and your compass to get you where you need to go. Because sometimes just things go haywire. In life, sometimes things go
Right.
haywire and sometimes things go crazy. And that's when you really grab hold to those principles, those habits, and you learn how to persevere. And I think that just builds character.
Yeah. And that's so important. There's so many uncontrollables in life, but if you stick to your principles and your values, you'll be able to find something tangible and something to work with. And especially,
Certainly.
yeah, and just pointing out to the fact that you transform that external doubt and external, almost fear from the other teachers, and internalized it and used it as motivation. And you were like, all right, I'm going to look good, and then I'm going to feel good, and then go out there and be intentional about the way in which I'm creating my relationship and reputation as, one, an administrator, but two, a person that has a relationship with a student. So I think
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's bad enough to have it to to have graduated from the school, 10 years, a decade before.
Yeah.
But to be, 27, 28 and walk into that position that traditionally back then, in the 90s, was usually reserved for people in their 40s and 50s. You know, it was, it was challenging, but, it just made me work, twice as hard to gain their trust and to gain the respect of the students there.
Yeah, you defied the odds. And so, just going back to the visibility point that you already brought up, in an article you wrote recently, you mentioned the importance of visibility and its relation to leadership. You also mentioned the fine line between upholding high standards yet remaining approachable to students. Could you go into more detail on visibility in general and specific examples you gained from this experience?
Approachability and relatability is sometimes the same things. I think students have to feel like that they can come and talk to you. They have to be able to, relate to you. But one of the things I learned that if I was providing a service for students not only in the classroom, but trying to do as much as I can outside of the classroom to help and assist them, the better off uh, the better off I was. The more active and involved I was with things outside of school that the students were involved in, the better the classroom experience was. Um, but also there's those students who may not necessarily be involved in extracurricular activities. You can show
Mm-hmm.
up for them too. Uh, for example, I always tried to make a connection, and I always had this great appreciation for students who were inclined in other areas such beyond academics, because there's an intelligence there. For those students who could, take on a trade or career and technical, enter into a career and technical field and become a skilled employer, or excuse me, employee, become a skilled employee.
Yeah.
There's something there. And, I always try to connect with that too, because I feel like that academics and problem solving is more than just the four core areas. It's physical education, music, art, career and technical education. And, one of the things I tried to do when I was superintendent was tried to create holistic experiences for students so that, if they did have interest and they did have talents, then they could explore those within the schools. And I see a lot of school systems today, building these academy or taking this academy-like approach,
Mm-hmm.
where students can specialize in the area that they're interested in career-wise. And I think that's so important that we try to connect students with what they're going to do beyond pre-K through 12 education, and try to connect them with that proper onboarding to
Yeah.
post-secondary education or the workforce, because I think that's where we make our greatest contribution is, we hand them off to, someone else, but we've got to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're not only ready and prepared, but as we hand them off, that they have the skills necessary to be competitive and to be successful.
Exactly. And you took an intentional route to, obviously, you were there for the students that were taking maybe the quote unquote common route in education where they are doing a sport or doing just college to public schools to university, but you took an intentional approach towards those individuals that also were doing a trade potentially. Coming from your background as being around a state that's coal mining and engineering and things of that nature that run a state. That's the infrastructure of a state. So I think that's
Right.
awesome.
And I have a great appreciation for, individuals that can do things that I cannot do, like build, construct, design. It's not all about math, English, social studies, and science. Those are important cores, but it's about so much more. It's about critical thinking. It's about, students being able to problem solve, students being able to collaborate and work together. All those things are important uh, concepts in public schools. One of the things that I've certainly, tried to, um, improve upon, particularly when I was superintendent, was career coaches and having career coaches available and career education not only available to high school students, but also middle school students and as early as elementary, to get them exposed to, something bigger than they are, an interest that's bigger than they are, so they can connect their education with their future aspirations. I always like what Covey said about, begin with the end in mind. And, what would you like to be doing? What would you like to, what do you think would make you happy? And this is the roadmap by which we get there. So I've always found that important.
Yeah, and that's such a great way to summarize it up too. It's not just the English class, it's not just the social studies class or math or science. There's a larger picture. There's an end goal or objective that someone might reach, and it's the relationships that you make, and it's building true abilities, and both mentally and physically, to start a craft or start a business. Or
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a talent there, and there's an intelligence there. And not everyone has, not everyone is a generalist. Not everyone is inclined in mathematics. Not everyone is inclined linguistically, inclined to write. Everyone has their interests. Everyone has their talents, and it's important that you try to find out what those are. I remember an English teacher who told me one time that he used to assign his career and technical education students, assignments around their workforce skills, and he got a better product, because they were actually writing about something they were interested in, and they were taking the concepts that they were learning in English and then applying them to trying to provide tutorials for others who might be interested in learning the skill that they're so good at.
Yeah.
So that connectivity in the classroom is so invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to visibility, just in regards to, one more point upon your opinions and your experience. Did you notice better relationships with students when you became more visible and present during the day at school? So just on the day-to-day, did you see a compounding evolution of a relationship between?
Absolutely. My first year, I remember my first principal telling me, don't smile until December. Now, I didn't take him literally. I knew what he meant, but basically he meant you need to go in tough, you need to establish boundaries and such. And I think that, yes, I was a teacher who, had good classroom discipline, had good control for the most part, but I wasn't reaching my potential, and I wasn't helping students reach their potential. It wasn't until I started trying to perfect upon the relationship component that I really saw, student learning take off and, gains being made within the classroom. So relationships is a big part of it. The student learner, that's incredibly important as well. But I used to have, one of my mentors used to say, nothing's more important than a student's name. And, I had another teacher who either called you by your first name or used the prefix, he would say Mr. Brewster, but it was always, your name was always, it was always out of respect. And there was no nicknames. Sometimes students have nicknames that they don't like.
Yeah.
So if a student wants to be called by a certain name, certainly call them by their name.
You want to know
that? But, for the most part, nothing's sweeter than a person's name. And, and using that as much as possible. And sometimes it comes down to simply, showing that respect of, calling them by name, knowing who they are, and, and giving them a pleasant acknowledgement when they walk into the classroom. One of the things that I used to do, and it was twofold. One was, to try to assist with, I thought tardies was the end of the world. I thought being on time for class was the most important thing,
right?
Particularly if you're going to get started out on the right foot, be on time. So it was a thing, but I would stand at the door, and it gave me the flexibility to talk to students while they were in the hallway and changing classes. But it also helped me to greet students as they came through the door. And, they would come in and start working and be immediately engaged
Yep.
in student learning. But it gave me some flexible time that, I can engage them as they come in and kind of be that friendly face when they walk into the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Engaging in, like you said, just the name is it's simple, yet it's so complex, in which I don't think every administrator or teacher is going to understand that thing. Maybe, I'm generalizing, but they're thinking about more of, how do I change the curriculum? How do I change the day-to-day for a student, rather than, I just want to remember the student's name. I just want to be there when they walk in the door. I think those are such simple but powerful.
And for some people, it's organic. Some people just are naturals. Others have to work at it. But I think that the work that they put into it will pay off for them in their profession. But isn't visibility like anywhere? I mean, if you're managing, if you're managing grocery stores and you've got 5 or 6 out there, isn't it important just to show up and to see people and to greet people and to, I always equated visibility to comfort. One of the highest compliments I received was from an office assistant and teachers who used to say, "We noticed you were out of the building yesterday. We're glad you're back." That told me that, one, there was a comfort in that visibility.
Right.
And two, I wasn't some jerk downstairs that they wanted to see, leave the building so they could go about their own business. So it kind of made me feel pretty good that, that they wanted me there, number one. But number two, there was a great deal of comfort in that visibility and showing up that it provided for them. Not a crutch, but just comfort, sense of comfort.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that visibility provides students and teachers and faculty members that sense of comfort, but also that pick me up, because the job's tough and it's hard. And you have to build that culture to where people want to be there, they want to work, and they feel like they're making a contribution, and they feel like that, they feel like that they've connected with their why. And I think that's so important, that if you're going to go into any profession, that you connect with what your why is, why you're there, not what you're doing, but why you're doing it. I mean, it's easy to walk in and say, "Well, I know what I'm doing," but do you know why you're doing what you're doing? And I think that connecting to that why is so important. And I've tried to do that as best I can. Why am I doing this? What is at the core? And and to make sure that my intentions, my why, is pure. What do I mean by pure? Was I had good intentions.
Exactly. And
I wanted to do good.
Right.
The why is I want to do good. I want to,
exactly.
make life better for someone else.
And the why before the what is that Simon Sinek, great public speaker and influential communicator, and he basically said that same exact thing. It's the why before going to the what. When starting a company or thinking about something, it's what am I going to do? How am I going to do it, rather than why am I doing what I want to do? So that's important. And then also that example you brought up, just in regards to, kind of that favorite compliment, was you knew you were making the influence outside greeting the students, but also you were valued on the inside with your fellow colleagues and coworkers, which is, that's got to feel good.
Well, that visibility, particularly, I talk about visibility as a classroom teacher, but that visibility as an administrator really means not only connecting with students, but connecting with the faculty and staff, going into the lunchroom, and, being visible there, being visible in the busiest areas of the building. So, all that was important.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears a bit, you were a driving force in a national study group called The Power of Partnerships Supporting Student Learners to Improve Graduation Rates. What went into the formulation of this study group?
That was a group of state board members from across the country, and I actually chaired that uh, as part of a national study group. But one of the things we really wanted to look at was we wanted to look at, you know, what goes into you know, what could greatly enhance a student uh, graduating and being successful in high school. And one of the things that we discovered was connecting students with resources, connecting students with
Right.
things that they needed externally uh, in order to be successful in the classroom was extremely important. I mean, that's why I got involved with Communities in Schools and Communities in Schools of Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
was because I felt like that having someone in the building that can connect students with external and families with external services was very critical into their success inside the school building. And the site coordinators that Communities and Schools employ are able to do that. They're able to make those connections, build those partnerships, and then connect students easily to what they need outside of the classroom. Teachers can't do that. They don't have time. They have to teach. Guidance
Mm-hmm.
counselors and counselors, the same thing. They provide counseling services, but as far as students getting the things that they need mentally, physically, socially, how can we do a better job of providing case management for students who need it the most, and connecting them with the services they
Sure.
need outside the school. And so, one of the things that I learned as a result of that study group was just how important it is to, get students to help and families to help and resources that they need. And I think if you've ever gone, I worked in a rural community. So, sometimes I would do home visits, and,
Mm-hmm.
you would be shocked and surprised, what some of these students are living in and with on a daily basis. There's a real struggle there. There's, the struggle of poverty. And, not all students are equal whenever they come into the building in terms of, economic, uh, you know,
Status or
and yeah, economic status. And so, uh, it's so important that, we connect students with the resources they need in order to be successful. So that's one of the things I learned. Now, since then, I've learned that graduation is not the ultimate goal of pre-K through 12 education.
right.
Uh, it's successful onboarding. It's ensuring that students make that transition to post-secondary education, the military, or the workforce, and that we just don't graduate them and wash our hands when they walk across stage. I mean, we celebrate that. That's a great accomplishment. But our job is to get them to the next level and to get them to the next stage and hand them off, whatever that looks like. I think that we start early on building connections and partnerships and relationships with community colleges, with four-year institutions, with the military, with the workforce, particularly the workforce, to ensure that we're providing what that student needs in their pre-K through 12 experience,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could be successful afterwards. And so I think that was a paradigm shift for me, because, and I really stole it from the chancellor of the Virginia Community College system at the time, Glenn DuBois, who basically said it's onboarding. It's about connecting them. And that's very true. I'd always thought, okay, graduation, it's a time of jubilation, celebration.
Yeah.
We pat them on the
That's
back
it.
and we send them out
Yeah.
into the world. No,
Right.
it's not.
Yeah.
It looks good on our graduation rate, but hey, we're responsible for what goes on beyond that.
Yeah.
And, we want them to have a good and prosperous life. So, how do we make that happen? And I
Right.
think that's so important.
Yeah. Like, it's, the numbers are important. The day-to-day calculations of it all, the graduation and all of that is necessary, but it's the broader picture of the continuation of life. It's, these students,
It really is.
these students, these individuals they're graduating, but they have a life to live, and they have something to do. Maybe it's not college, maybe it is a trade, maybe it's doing something else that they're passionate about. So I think that's important that you guys were able to make those relationships and stay in their lives.
Our job is to turn them into lifelong learners. And the learning never stops. Hey, if I'd stopped learning when I got out of school, if I'd stopped learning right out of high school or right out of college, I mean, you think about everything that I would have missed out on. I mean, and with AI coming up and rapid transformation of our
Right.
society and what's going to happen from this point on, I mean, we're basically preparing students for careers that don't even exist
Mm-hmm.
right now. I mean, a kindergartner comes in to school. We are providing an education or trying to provide an education for that student for a career that doesn't exist.
Right.
And a workforce that's going to significantly transform over the next couple of decades. So that's exciting on one hand, it's scary on another, but it's also challenging. And I think that, sometimes you have to instill into them the basics
Mm-hmm.
that they need to be successful and that they need to be lifelong learners and that they need to be able to persevere and continually open their mind to new ideas and changes.
Right. And how would you guys, you talk about AI and just the inevitable transformation of
Yeah,
technology in modern life. How do you plan for that for students?
I thought a little bit about this. You can't ignore it.
Right.
And we have to embrace it. We have to teach them how to use it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to teach them how to be able to use it in whatever endeavor they choose to pursue. For example, it does level the playing field in a lot of areas. For example, if I'm a writer, and I do some writing, but one of the things that, writers often do is they hand their stuff off to an editor. And the editor goes through and looks at it and, makes changes to the sentence structure and
Sure.
changes, grammatical changes and such. Kind of evens the playing field because now with AI and ChatGPT, everyone has an editor, which is great.
Exactly.
The thing is, you can't totally rely on AI. Number one, and number two, if you use AI, you're never going to come up with any original thoughts. If
Right.
you use it like a crutch, for example, if I said, write me a 3 to 5 page paper on, the Renaissance.
Sure.
Yeah, it can produce that for you, but it's going to be, it's going to be a product of AI, and there's not
Exactly.
going to be, there's none of you in there. So you teach students how to write, but also teach students how to use it as a tool to debate ideas. ChatGTP, I want to debate you
Mm-hmm.
on the issue of such and such, and or use it as a feedback tool. For example, I just wrote this 7-page research paper. Tell me what you think. Tell me about what you think about the main points,
Mm-hmm.
and use it as an evaluation tool as
Right.
opposed to a crutch or something that you're going to produce something quickly for someone else that. And that's my greatest fear, is that it makes us lazy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's.
And we use
Go
it
ahead.
as a crutch.
Yeah. It's operating on the fine line of, there's so many times where, myself included, where I just want to use ChatGPT or an AI system to formulate some text or whatever, rather than, it's important to teach students and individuals that, okay, you can learn this, or you can use this as a learning tool, or like you said, an evaluation tool, rather than, okay, you can do your assignment on ChatGPT and that's it. But there's no learning involved. There's no work involved. There's no growth. So
No,
that's key.
and I do think that you teach the same skills, but you teach them how to use the tool in order to make their product better, to improve upon
Absolutely.
their product and what they're
Absolutely.
doing. But it is scary.
Mm-hmm.
And what I don't want, and the writers in Hollywood are striking right now simply because they don't want content developed from AI. And I think you take the human emotion, you take the human experience out of that, you're going to damage the product. And so I
Yep.
do think that there needs to be, some regulation. I do think that there needs to be some boundaries set around AI so that, we don't lose what uh, is, is humankind has been our trajectory of growth
Exactly.
throughout civilization.
Exactly.
And if we start relying on computers to do our stuff, then you're gonna see a new dark age.
Yep.
That and maybe AI, you know, will maybe there'll be a movement in response to AI that
Yep.
creates something totally new and different. I think we're on the edge of seeing what's going to happen over the next decade that's going to really transform the way we work and the way we do things. But I think that's why it's so scary. That's why it's scary for me. But hey,
Mm-hmm.
I use it in order to provide more structure
Mm-hmm.
and provide feedback for my product, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. But you don't want it to create exclusive content for you because
Exactly.
even because someone else could be asking ChatGTP the same question that you're
Mm-hmm.
asking and produce something similar that's
The
going to
same exact
show up. And that's
content.
what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and it's obvious when it's absent your style of writing, uh, you know, uh, that
Yeah.
it could be problematic.
Yeah. You
But
you lose. Go ahead.
I do think you have to teach students how to use the tool.
Absolutely. And you lose the human nature aspect of things. And when you talk
Yeah.
about, I mean, this decade from now on, I mean, currently is so important for us because it's, are we going to allow artificial intelligence and the evolution of technology to support us and make us smarter and stronger and more um, advance humankind, or is it going to be the deterioration of humankind, and we're just going to rely
Right.
on it and that just be our knowledge and be like, oh, I need to submit a paper, okay, let me just use this. I need to send something to my boss, let me utilize this to do the calculations or the processes. So that's an important point.
And artists. I mean, the tortured artists suffer for their work,
Yep.
and some of the best. Some of the best songs, best music, best albums come from a period of pain for the artist. One album that comes to my mind is Billy Joel's Nylon Curtain. Billy Joel at the time was going through a rough divorce, and he produced a very uh, dark album. And I think that human emotion creates art. And
So
I think
important.
with ChatGTP could probably create lyrics and songs and all that stuff, but it doesn't represent the human experience,
Mm-hmm.
which I think that's what art is, the human experience.
Exactly. And there you mentioned it, there's AI that's basically copywriting music. It's
Yeah.
mimicking the lips of individuals to make them speak Swedish insteid of English or German instead of French. But I love how you already are touching on music. So I've heard through the grapevine that you're a big music fan in general. Maybe this is too broad of a question, but if you had to do so, could you name off your top 3 bands or artists, or more specifically, maybe your um, top favorite albums or songs?
Yeah, sure. One of the songs that I truly love is uh, from a movie, Tootsie, and it's really weird. I guess the song is just, it reminds me of New York City. It reminds me of old New York City. It reminds me of good theater. And it's Tootsie, It Might Be You by Stephen Bishop. That's a great song. If I had to pick an album, one album would be Revolver by the Beatles because it was so experimental, so ahead of its time. And, the Beach Boys would follow it with Pet Sounds, which I think that, their attempt was to try to one up the Beatles, but still at the same time, Brian Wilson was a genius, and that
Mm-hmm.
album is melodic and it's beautiful. Uh, and Stevie Wonder, musical genius. Songs from the Key of Life is one of the greatest albums of all times. It has everything. and it's a double album. And back in the '70s, that was kind of common that artists would put together these double albums, because they would have so much material that they would cut that wouldn't fit on one record, so they'd have to put it on two. But yeah, I kind of I'm all over the map when it comes to music.
Sure.
And Songs from the Big Chair, Tears for Fears is a great album.
Right.
Everyone's familiar with the song "Everybody Wants to Rule the World," and I think it's been
one of my mom's favorite songs.
covered many, many, many times. But I think that song is I think that song is timeless in that it's relevant to just about any era, and it's very true. Everybody wants to rule the world, and
exactly.
I think that's definitely the case today. I can listen to just about anything, but I kind of lean in, particularly REM. I love REM. Life's Rich Pageant is one of the greatest albums of all time in my view and from my perspective. So,
okay.
I could listen to just about every genre. Even occasionally a little bit of country, not the bro country that's listened to now, but the George Jones and Dwight Yoakam and stuff like that. I absolutely love. Those that have great substance in songwriting, and from those guys who were legends who lived rough lives. They lived the life. Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Hank Williams Jr. They lived hard, and it's reflected in their music, and that's something special. There's you can sense the pain when George Jones sings a song that someone else written, and he internalizes it and makes it relevant. It's like in the Grand Tour, it's a powerful thing. You don't have to write the song in order to interpret it a whole new way. Look at Johnny. If you've ever had a chance, Johnny Cash did "Hurt," the Nine Inch Nails song "Hurt," and the whole, what he added to it was an entirely different dimension that Trent Reznor had in mind when he wrote it. But Johnny Cash was able to take it and transform it into something that was just magnificent and over the top, and one of the more powerful songs of certainly my generation.
Absolutely. I love where this is going, because you can sing I mean, I'm not a singer, but you can sing a song just based on its words, or like you said, you can pull a Johnny Cash, you can internalize, the sadness or the melancholy or the happiness maybe, and that emotion is brought forth in a song. And that's what's amazing too about maybe acting, where, individuals are method actors. Heath Ledger, the Joker. I mean, if anyone else tried to potentially pull that off, yes, they could. Obviously, there's plenty other examples of great Joker representations, but he internalized that character. He internalized the way in which that individual lived. And so mentioning that in music is also incredibly important.
I think to his own detriment.
Right.
Because you can internalize something like that as an actor to where it starts affecting you.
Sure.
And I think I always think that's why artists are so tortured at times, because they do transform and they do become something completely different. And sometimes it's hard to come back from that, I imagine. I mean, I'm not an actor. I've never experienced that. But, you try being someone continuously for 6 weeks, I'm sure it's hard to get back.
A profession can change an individual to their detriment. So I think it's a good point to also bring up. So switching gears for the last little bit that we have, what is your advice to students of all kinds? So those in high school, those pursuing undergraduate or graduate degrees, to flourish with their studies and education?
I always like to go back to the Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, who, did a lot of research based upon his experiences in the Holocaust, during the Holocaust in concentration camp. And one of the things, and it sounds so simple, but it's very complex. He said, between stimulus and response lies a space. And within that space is the freedom to choose your reaction to any given situation. And choose how you come out the other end. And so that's something that's extremely difficult, I think, sometimes to do, is within that space to respond correctly, appropriately, or just
Right.
take a pause moment and think about the impact of what you're about to do.
Yeah.
And so from personal experience, I would definitely encourage them to consider that pause as an opportunity, whether it's to make the right decision, make the right choice, to be a better person, or be the better person, based upon whatever the circumstances and situation is,
Yeah.
that they take advantage of that,
Yeah.
and take advantage of that opportunity to make the right decision and the right choice, and
100%.
such. The other thing is, what I said before about being a continuous learner, I think is so critical, particularly nowadays when things are changing so rapidly and changing so fast. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in nostalgia,
Mm-hmm.
and nostalgia is good because nostalgia has a habit of things happening 30 years ago coming back around, and that's great. And there are some things, and it's important to keep up, but there are some timeless principles, philosophers, individuals, studies that are important and will always be important,
Mm-hmm.
that we can always lean upon. So you need to keep up to date, but you can't forget the past. And I think you have to be well versed in history. I think you have to be well versed in, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We need to take advantage of that, and use it as a foundation for where we're going. And so whatever that might be for you, for me, Stephen Covey's book that I first got a copy of back in the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
I had a health professor who, started talking about sharpening the saw,
Mm-hmm.
and how important it was to approach, holistic improvement from a physical, spiritual,
Sure.
social, emotional, and mental avenue. Do it holistically. And so, that really had an impact on me. But those things like that are timeless, because we know that exercise is important. We know that reading and professional learning is important. We know that it's important to have work-life balance. We know all these things. But the thing is, here's where it goes back between stimulus and response. Some of us, take these timeless principles and we set them aside, and then
Mm-hmm.
we react.
Yep.
So,
That
so it's important to lean on the past as we move, but not to ignore the future.
I love that quote so much. Like the choice between stimulus and response.
It's the
It's
pause moment. Yeah.
exactly. And for students especially, if an individual, like I would love to be going back to even high school or college as well, and for a student to understand every day, every moment they have a choice to react to a particular conversation, a situation. I mean, they, as cliche as it is, they create their own reality in absolutely every second of their life. So that's crucial.
Absolutely. And I have this this lyric that my brother. I used to go on service calls with him. He was worked for a battery company, and the batteries were what ran the machinery in the mines. And he'd go on the service call. We'd go over into McDowell County, which is over in West Virginia, these small communities, and they would have these diners set up, and they would sell bootleg 8-track cassettes. And I remember picking up one called The Class of 1974, and there was a song on it, and I actually, have it engraved on a piece of wood. But it was a band called Wet Willie, and it was a song called Keep On Smiling, and it says, keep on smiling through the rain, laughing at the pain, rolling through the changes till the sun comes out again. And I think that's so important, when we're going through bad times, that we just persevere. We, wear that smile
Yep.
and we get through it. And eventually the sun does come out again.
Yes, sir.
And so, I go from quoting Viktor Frankl to quoting Wet Willie, but
Hey, I mean,
that line right there, particularly, it was odd. I was going down, and my brother had just passed, and I was on my way down to help plan the funeral and everything, and that song came on the radio, and it was kind of like one of those God winks where,
right.
wow, yeah, this is a dark day, but we're going to get through it.
This is important to hear.
Yeah, we're going to get through it, and it was almost like a sign from him that, hey, roll with the changes, and the sun will come out again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a day-to-day battle. I mean, also those little moments like that are so coincidental, but they're also, it's like maybe everything does potentially happen for a reason, and everything's important in that nature. And so kind of switching context, I guess, in regards to your advice to teachers and administrators and individuals that have the ability to have an influence on students in that context. So in regards to public schools, universities, etc.
I still think boundaries are important. I still think procedures are important for students. So they have to, I had a mentor once tell me that students will do what you let them get by with doing. And I think that's true. You have to create a culture and environment in your classroom and in your school where teaching and learning can take place. So I think you do have to set certain parameters, set certain boundaries and such, but that doesn't stop you from caring. In fact, if you put those boundaries in place, doesn't it mean that you care more?
Yep.
I mean, I care enough. If I didn't care about you, I'd let you come in here and sleep. But because
Exactly.
I care about you and because I care about your learning, I'm not going to allow it. I'm not going to allow it to happen in this classroom. I can let you turn in mediocre work because I care for you. I'm going to set the expectation higher for you. Jaime Escalante said students will rise to the level of expectations that you set forth. And, I think that's important. High standards are extremely important. And I said, and sometimes, we talk about building relationships and we talk about caring, but we don't talk about those high standards that come with it. And it means I care. If I set high standards for you in the classroom and I'm not willing to take sloppy, mediocre work from you, that means I care enough to say, hey, I believe in you.
Yeah.
But
I want you to
you
produce
need to do better work.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I heard this once, praise is conditioned upon performance. For example, if I praised you for something that you didn't do, then it comes off hollow and disingenuous. But praise is conditioned upon performance, while encouragement is unconditional.
Right.
Meaning you can always impart encouragement, encourage someone to do better, to improve. But praise means that they've done something that's praiseworthy in order for it to be authentic. And I think that authentic praise is so important, but encouragement is just as important. But praise is conditioned, meaning if a student shows growth and improvement, that's a reason and opportunity to praise them. But if they're not doing what they're supposed to, that's an opportunity to encourage them.
Based upon the student's own performance. That's the way in which you change your perspective and way in which you're having that relationship with them.
I wish I could go back, but I will tell you, it is a day-to-day grind. It is a rigor that makes me appreciate the profession of teaching and administration so much today. Having gone through it and knowing what that day-to-day looks like, it's hard, it's tough. And so, hats off to those that are going in every day, trying to make a difference in the lives of students. I have a great appreciation for them now that I've left pre-K through 12.
Agreed. Hats off to those individuals that are making influence in all industries in general. So I think that's an incredible point. And
Yeah, it all goes back to a teacher. I
Yeah,
mean, it who's influenced you, your parents, your teachers. When you're young and impressionable. I mean, these people are really, for better or worse, role models. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, well, although I did not have you as a teacher, I want to say thank you on behalf of kind of Virginia education system and education in general. You've climbed that education totem pole, and much appreciation for all your service there. And I also just want to open the floor to you if you have any last words to say. But I really appreciate you coming on to the Common Human podcast.
But I guess the only last words is I learned so much from a diverse amount of resources, and I think it's so important, for students to try to work to get as close to the truth that they possibly can, and be independently minded.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brewster. I really
Okay,
appreciate it.
thank you, Luke. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.